Okay, hello everybody, and a very warm, literally warm welcome on this cold January to the CILIPS West Branch Career Development Evening. It is so nice to see so many of you here, and we're joined by numerous members of the committee who all have insights and inspiration to share from their respective sectors. So a little bit of the technical admin side first. My name's Kirsten, I'm Membership Officer for CILIP Scotland. We're also joined by my colleague Leah, and as I say, many members of the West Branch Committee. So you're in very safe hands. If you need anything throughout, please don't hesitate to pop a message in the chat. As you're aware, we are recording tonight. We're in speaker mode, so you won't be very visible either way. If you'd like to keep your cameras on, it's always a delight to see your faces, but if you're struggling with bandwidth at all, we'd usually suggest popping the camera off. If you could keep your mics muted for now, we'd really appreciate it. We will be coming to Q&As later in the evening, but just so that we can hear our presenters, if you can keep them muted, that would be much appreciated. And captions are enabled. You should be seeing them scrolling up along the bottom of your screen, and you can toggle these on or off according to your preference, just using, again, the toolbar that's on the bottom of the Zoom. And unfortunately, I do have to start with something of an apology, because we were hoping that our wonderful West Branch Chair and Chair of the CILIPS Trustees, Heather Marshall, would be able to join us. Unfortunately, she's unwell. She was going to be kicking us off with a fantastic interview skills presentation, but alas has not been able to join us tonight. So we're sending Heather all our best wishes for a very speedy recovery. And in the meantime, you're briefly stuck with me. We will make sure that Heather's presentation reaches you before too much longer. And we have not one, not two, but 5 lightning talks from committee members coming up. So there's still many, many treats in store. But what I thought I would do for the next kind of 5 to 10 minutes is actually signpost in the meantime, while we're researching interview tips and tricks, CVs, covering letters, you name it, all the resources that are at your fingertips as a CILIP member. So I'm going to be delving into the CILIPS website and the CILIP Career Hub to just show you what's already out there and the resources that are at our fingertips. So I will share my screen now. There we are, bear with me, and hopefully you can all now see the CILIPS website. Now, of course, if you're like me, this is already your homepage, but just in case it's not, I'll go back to the main page. This is just cilips.org.uk. And what I'm going to highlight tonight is our Emerging Leaders collection. So if we scroll along the top menu to resources, and you can see we've got a range of the Reveal project, we've got the CILIPS podcast, like and subscribe, of course, and a range of EDI resource collections. But the one that I'm going to highlight tonight is Emerging Leaders. This was one that we started developing back in 2022 because we were aware that this is a real pressing need for the sector. People want to sort of get as much experience as possible. Increasingly, we want to experiment to try new roles within across sectors. So this is what Emerging Leaders is all about. You can see we actually had an extensive, it was a whole afternoon webinar a couple of years ago, so you're very welcome to watch that on CILIPS YouTube. The caption recording is right there. And we've got it divided into 3 sections, all of which I think are very helpful and relevant to our theme tonight. So especially for starting out, stepping up, if you're an early career professional, I couldn't recommend highly enough CILIPS students and new professionals. They've compiled comprehensive lists of websites, webinars, so much more to help you if you're relatively new into the sector. You can also join their mailing list, and indeed you can join their committee. So I'm sure by the time this evening is over, you will be inspired to become part of West Branch to support their work, and also absolutely recommend that for CILIPS SMPC. We also have our own online learnings. I've already mentioned CILIPS YouTube, and you'll find a whole range of webinars, of workshops there that are so relevant. And we're going to be hearing from Ania very shortly this evening. Information professionals can indeed wear many hats. So really tapping into that employability focus and the diversity of sectors, the diversity of skills that we're all developing very often without realizing it. That is all here in Ania's wonderful workshop and across the online learning web space. We also highlight the Meet Our Members blog and the CILIPS Career Hub. Now, I'm going to be delving into this in more detail very shortly, but you can see we've got tips on CVs, interviews, job roles, you name it. So this is really the place that you want to be, whatever role you aspire to within libraries and information. So I mentioned that this second section of our Emerging Leaders collection is 3 top tips from us. So one is haute couture, but even if you're not a fashion fan, we'll be discussing this again in the CILIP Career Hub. Our top tip is to always be sure that you tailor your application covering letter and your CV to the role you're applying for. Again, we will mention this in more detail in our CV advice, but you know, especially for roles in our sector, they're very popular, understandably so. high numbers of applicants to stand out. You really want, it's well worth that little investment of time to tailor everything you can. And the PKSB, so much within the CILIP sphere, is valuable when you do just that. Again, a second shout out for Ania already, and her fantastic employability session mentioned that we often sell ourselves short when it comes to showcasing how many skills we've got and how varied those skills are. So I've already mentioned this, becoming a member of a CILIPS committee is just one example of something that can develop your skills in leadership, in strategic planning, social media management, event organisation, as you've seen tonight, to name but four. So we really can't recommend highly enough getting involved in the CILIPS community, however suits your schedule, however suits your career aspirations. And speaking of which, I would always recommend professional registration. I truly think it's the single best step I've ever taken in my career, first with certification, then with chartership. And you can find a blog that I wrote about that journey. We will be delving into the PKSB a little later. I think it's going to come up in a couple of presentations. And also, if you everything you ever wanted to know about the PKSB but were afraid to ask, if you're interested in professional registration or just how to showcase your skills within the sector, this is really a wonderful workshop with our professional registration support officers. Bookmark it. It's an ideal one for learning from and for the themes that we're discussing tonight. The third section of Emerging Leaders is all about opportunities for all. So recognising that historically leadership has not been where it needs to be in terms of diversity, in terms of inclusion. So you can see a wonderful article by the constant winspiration, Amina Shah, National Librarian of Scotland. She spoke to information professional about leadership, community and the power of storytelling. So you can access Amina's full interview there and also watch one of her wonderful inspirations. Amina is kind enough to join us in conversation with Dr. Adele Patrick at the upcoming Winspiration International Women's Day Conference. So there's so much to learn from these two inspirational women about just what leadership can and should mean for the sector going forward. And I've also identified here the fact that although 74% of CILIPS members are women, we only constitute 51% of chief executive roles. So there are resources here that you'll find all about fair share, women into leadership, really correcting that imbalance, correcting that injustice for the benefit of individual professionals and the benefit of the sector. I've also highlighted how minoritised ethnic professionals have been underrepresented historically. That's been identified in workforce mapping data. So you can delve into our anti-racism collection. You can see the anti-racist educator and so much more. There are so many great actors, great organisations across the sector and beyond that are ensuring that we're creating an actively anti-racist space. And similarly, the CILIP Disability Network are doing wonderful work about sort of dismantling the barriers that have all too often been in place, and you can learn more about this in our accessibility and neurodiversity collection. Also love this particularly powerful article that Amina highlighted for us about What's Love Got to Do with It by fantastic Simone, the Vice Chancellor at the University of Leeds. Really well worth a read. And I think the theme of love, of loving what you do, of loving why you're here serving our communities is going to come up in our presentations throughout this evening. And then we also have a thought-provoking blog by our very own CILIP CEO, Nick Poole, about slow librarianship. Now, that doesn't mean putting our feet up and reading books, sadly, but actually having a kind of responsive, a values-driven practice. It's not as aggressive as leadership has historically been, focused on learning and reflection. And again, that is going to definitely come out in our presentations as the evening goes on. One final thing I'll highlight in this collection is our career mentorship. Now, if you are a CILIPS member, and I hope that many of you already are, you have access to this over and above your mentorship as part of professional registration. If you choose to undertake chartership or similar PR, you can either become a career mentor or you can access a career mentor. So you just simply follow this link. We can circulate this around the list later on. But you can it's advice within exploring careers, setting goals, developing contacts, identifying resources, very much everything that we're going to be covering this evening. So if that sounds like something that would be a benefit of your career, please do just navigate to this page. You can search for career mentorship on the CILIP site. As I say, we'll be sharing this link. You can apply to be a career mentor or to be a mentee, and we would love to see some of you uptaking that opportunity as a result of this evening. But heading back to emerging leaders, what I'd like to, for my little segment, I'd like to highlight the range of resources that are available within the CILIP Careers Hub. It's so comprehensive. There's really a lot to get our teeth into to really enhance the career search and how we showcase our skills, whatever our role is, whatever our aspiration is. So let's briefly delve in and have a look. So you can see we're now on the CILIP website and it's within the Careers Hub. So this is really an extensive toolkit, and you can see there's so much here about qualifications, starting out, furthering your career, changing career direction, very important. But for the time remaining to me, I'm going to highlight resources within this section of finding a job. I think hopefully this harnesses a little of what Heather's advice would have been and will be once we integrate it into this recording. But let's delve in, and there's so much to learn, so much to see within the Careers Hub and how to find a job specifically. So you can see that we've got links indeed to information professional jobs, again, touching on the CILIP Students and New Professionals community. Make sure you're following them on X, on Instagram, because they also showcase a number of opportunities every week. But we are all interested, I think, in writing CVs. This is something Heather will go into in greater detail. But let me just delve in and show what advice we have here, because I know that I personally learned a lot from this. You can see that they mention even the fact that there are two main ways to lay out a CV. So reverse chronological, which is your most recent experience coming first. I think that's what many of us are used to. But they also highlight that you could opt for a skills-based CV. So especially if you're changing careers, changing sector, if you're coming back after a career break, that might be a really strong way, a really holistic way to showcase your skills. And they highlight here, to do that, you would group your experience under broad skill categories. So the PKSB, again, is ideal. You'll have seen our glorious wheel of all the skills that we use as library and information professionals. So that can be a great starting point if you are delving into that skills-based CV. Whatever approach you choose to use, you can see our three top tips. One is to think about the layout. So make sure it's readable. It sounds obvious, but it's worth restating. Don't have long blocks of unbroken text. No kind of overly creative formatting. We do, of course, want to see your creativity, but not in a way that damages legibility. So a readable font, make sure it's not too small to be read on screen. This is important because historically we think of a CV printed out, but increasingly recruiters and assessors will be reading it online. Keep it relevant. It should be no more than 2 pages long, which sounds a lot when you're looking at 2 blank pages, but in fact, as soon as you start integrating your skills in that, they get eaten up very quickly. So it's actually exercise in synthesizing and prioritizing. And we want to make sure that it's as tailored again to the job that you're going for as possible. And this is a fantastic tip. Don't just list your skills, but demonstrate them. An example is so much more powerful than a simple statement. We often hear, especially in the literary world, that it's about show, don't tell. So show, don't just tell you have leadership skills, show a program you've led on, show the fact that you led in the designing an event like this. And, you have that evidence base there. You're an evidence-based professional, so you're actually evidencing your own skills by doing that. And a final tip on CVs and the CILIP Careers Hub is the fact that some large employers, they do use application tracking systems. So you want to make sure that you're hitting those keywords. So again, look at the job description, look at the essential criteria, and make sure that your CV, that your application is tailored to those requirements. So I'll pop back to the previous page and we will now have a look at cover letters. There's some fantastic advice to also find here. So a good cover letter, as they say, it can be even more important than a CV because this is your first communication with your potential employer. Again, it's all about that tailoring. A one size fits all. We've all seen it. It can feel a bit too much like spam, a bit too much like hit and miss if it's it's not tailored. It's actually just a matter of respect, making sure that you're politely and correctly addressing whoever that attention that you're getting with your covering letter. Read the instructions. Again, start with the obvious, but it's worth saying. Check that you've answered what they're looking for. And again, kind of cross-reference, make sure that you have that job description there. And they note that usually you would keep it to about 1 page. If it's very detailed, extend this to 2, but really realistically, I think no more than that is a good rule of thumb to make sure that you're getting that synthesis right, that prioritization right. So they advise to pick out the key requirements of the job description. They'll usually be at the top of each section, and they are often labelled essential. So use, again, show, don't tell, use an example of how you meet those criteria, and then you can reinforce this with what's in your CV. And once again, you can't beat the PKSB for identifying what your skills are. If you've developed a PKSB recently, and I know many of you have as part of your chartership, then you will have your annotations, you will have your reflective notes, and that can be so valuable for writing this covering letter. And of course, it's only polite. You're, of course, as CILIP members, this goes without saying, but remember to thank them for their time and consideration. And include your contact details. They're going to want to get in touch with you once you've written this fantastic covering letter. So make sure that you do follow that up. Another area that I know Heather will be elaborating on, and it's worth looking at here in the Careers Hub briefly, is application forms. So it can be a little off-putting if you encounter you've got this perfected CV, you've got this perfect cover letter, and then no, they want an application instead, but you already have the information there. And in fact, the extra little bit of consideration that's required, as they note here, it's less likely to get those kind of generic CV submissions if they're asking for an application form. There's going to be fewer candidates that get to the end of that process. So it's really worth taking the time to get your application form to that excellent standard. So have a read through it thoroughly before you start. Maybe even develop a separate Word document so that you can take the questions, you can work on your answers, make sure you're saving as you go, of course. And then again, it's about breaking down whatever the question is, breaking into your skill sets, making sure that you're cross-referencing again and again with the job description. So you do actually have a cover letter part, you have a CV part, and never leave things out that you're going to have that. Actually, perhaps an application form will also have a little bit of extra room for you to really elaborate on how you've grown your skills and your commitment to the profession. And their word of warning here that if you're asked to submit a CV as well, that doesn't mean that you shirk the work of fleshing out that application form. That is your golden ticket to getting an interview. They're not asking for it for no reason. So it is really worth dedicating that little bit of time to getting it into a tip-top standard. And last but not least from me, I will delve into what the Careers Hub has to share with us about interviews. So not going to lie, this is often the bit that everybody hates. It's daunting, and yet you've got to this stage, you've got to the final hurdle. So just that little bit of confidence, digging deep, and you can do great stuff. And it's a skill, just like any others. It can be learned. So they're highlighting the importance of researching the organisation that you're applying to, and also having an eye on the social media feeds so that certainly I can speak from us at CILIPS, we would want to know exactly you would be up to date with what we've got going on that week, that month, the rest of the year. So it's definitely a good idea to have a close look on LinkedIn and their social media content. So there are two types of interviews that you could come across. One, the most common is skills or competency-based interviews. So this is, they will begin looking at the job description and looking for an example of how you have that skill, how you've already showcased this in the past, that you're a safe pair of hands to trust with this criteria, with this requirement. So again, it's show, don't tell. And it's very valuable. This is something we say to PR candidates all the time. It's not about, for once you don't have to be a team player. We want to know about your contribution, your individual value, what you brought. So it's not the time to be shy, as they always say with chartership. This is the time to be a peacock. This is the time to showcase your beautiful feathers, and don't be shy. And equally, don't be afraid to use an example of where something went wrong. This, very much like chartership again, will show you as a reflective practitioner. So you've got example of not only work that you've done, that you've had the courage to give something a go, but you've also learned from it, which I'm sure is something all employers want to see. And they highlight that the value of a competency-based interview is that you can prepare it as long as you've got that job description there, you're cross-referencing it with your skills, with your experience, you're going to be doing great. Another type of interview that I think is increasingly common, although I personally haven't encountered it yet, is a strengths-based interview. So rather than focusing on past experience, it's looking at who you are, a more holistic sense of what you enjoy, what you're good at, indicating potential for future performance and enthusiasm for a job. And of course, knowing our members, there's no shortage of that enthusiasm. So this is all about answering openly and honestly. It's not something that you can prepare for as rigidly as the competency-based interview, and yet just bring your whole self, bring your enthusiasm. Again, don't be afraid to acknowledge where you would like to improve a performance, where you think you got things wrong, where you learned from something, and to share your aspirations. So it does have a kind of a lovely holistic energy, and be really interesting to hear later on people's experiences of these different types of interviews. The Careers Hub also has a little bit of information about many of us. I mean, for my own role, I was interviewed via Zoom because we were not legally allowed to do it any other way. So you might be facing a telephone or a Zoom or a Teams interview, but they highlight preparing for them exactly as you would face-to-face. One little tip from my own is to even remember that, as I'm doing right now, you're looking at the camera, so don't constantly look at the screen. If you're wanting to make eye contact as you would in an in-person one, even put a pair of goggly eyes either side of your camera, and that will remind you to look up. And then they also have a few top tips. Don't answer with yes or no. Examples and explanation always back to show, don't tell. Be as concise as you can, keeping to the point, but equally don't be afraid to ask for clarification or for repetition if you're not quite sure that you're giving them the answer that they need. Have some questions ready to ask of your interviewers at the end. So this is always, again, it shows your interest, your engagement with the work that they're doing. Something that this is unofficial advice, but even if you've had a really sort of hearty, engaging conversation, you can also say, when they ask you if you have any questions, oh, well, I was going to ask, but you've detailed this for me so fantastically, I don't feel I have to anymore. Sort of flatter them a little bit, say that they've educated you as part of the interview. And above all, don't arrive late. I'm sure none of you would do this, but make sure you know where you're going, if it's online or in person, who you're meeting and how to get there, and leave extra time so that, as we know, the trains, the public transport, it can be a little more temperamental than we would like. So make sure that you don't leave anything to chance there. So just to briefly recap, you can head to the CILIPS website, go along to resources, down to emerging leaders, and that is where you will discover all these resources. So I will stop sharing my screen about now. Does anybody have any questions at this point, or we can get stuck in with our lightning talks? I'm just going to delve into the chat. Interviews are difficult on both sides. That's a good point, Ania. We don't think of it as difficult on the other side. Yeah, Fiona's echoing that. It's being on an interview panel is also stressful. So it's a skill, but even that, I love how meta that is, that you could reflect in an interview of how interviewing is a skill that you're improving. I like that. And thank you for Ania highlighting, yeah, absolutely, Winspiration is open to all. We can all be feminist allies. We can all support the diversification of the sector. And thank you for sharing that link, Leah. If nobody has any questions, then I think it's about time that we hand over to our wonderful lightning presenters. So we're so delighted to be joined by 5 members of the West Branch Committee to share insights into their roles. And I believe, Margaret, you are first up. So I see you've been having some technical difficulties. Hopefully we're sorted now. Whenever you're ready.
I hope so. I had to switch to my work laptop. I think it was a browser issue on my personal laptop that was causing the audio to just keep cutting out. But fingers crossed, it seems okay now. So do you want me to just share my screen and start?
Great, whenever you're ready, yeah, Margaret. So let me just check you're a co-host now. I will make you co-host on your new laptop, and then that should be you now with just that little green bit at the bottom to share.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We can, looks great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Margaret Gair, and as requested, there's a little photo of me. And I am currently the head of the Library and Information Service at the Scottish Government, and I'm also head of profession for government librarians, not just Scottish Government librarians in Scotland. I chair the Scottish Government Librarians Forum, and I'm also a CILIP mentor, and I am the Government Knowledge and Information Management Leaders Group representative on the British Standards Knowledge Management Standard Committee. So that's who I am. How did I get there? I think that was the next thing that the CILIPS West wanted me to talk about. So I started out a number of years ago, actually a number of decades ago now, as an assistant librarian in what was then the UK Department of the Environment in Westminster. And that gave me a real grounding in all aspects of government, library and information work. So we had to do 8 hours in the inquiry desk every day. Then we were also rotated round every month, every 18 months round the sections. So from cataloguing into interlibrary loans, into acquisitions, etc. Back in the day, of course, that was very much where librarianship was. It's moved, and I'll talk about that as I go through about where it's gone and where I think it's heading. But that was where I started out, got promoted there to librarian. Then I moved back to Scotland to be a librarian in the Ministry of Defence, running what was then their Scottish library, Scottish area library. And at that point, and I think from a career perspective, this is the first tip and first thought I'm going to give you about how to progress your career. I felt it was a small library. It was cut off from the rest of the team who were down in London. There was a big danger of becoming very isolated, of just sitting there in my comfort zone and not progressing. So I thought, what am I going to do about this? So I started volunteering for things. There were cross-government working groups. I started putting up my hand to join those. Then one of our senior librarians retired, and part of her role was to manage the procurement, the contracts for book supply, for database supply, etc. So again, I stuck my hand up and said, could I take that on? And that meant that I got experience of the whole contract management process, from writing the initial specification, working with commercial to get the tender into shape, putting the contract out to tender, doing the tender evaluation, and managing the contract through life, and then going through the whole process again. The contracts we let were framework contracts available to the whole of government, so I was networking across government to make sure that what we in MOD were putting out was what the rest of government actually wanted. I was chairing the MOD's purchasing consortium, so getting feedback from the other librarians across MOD as to how the contracts were working, what the problems were, and I was working with suppliers. And that was really good at building my skill set, not just that specific contract management skill set, but my communication skills, my networking skills, etc. And also building my confidence, because from a basically know nothing when I took it on, by the time I finished doing it, I was really knew quite a lot about it, to the extent that I was invited to write a guide to contract management for the government cross-government KIM group. However, at that point, I was looking to get a promotion, so I thought I need to diversify a little bit more. So I joined a policy unit in MOD, and I joined it as a sort of embedded librarian, but about a year after I joined, there was an internal audit of MOD's knowledge management, which it failed. So my team leader said, we need somebody to do something about this. And Margaret, you're a librarian, you must know about knowledge management, you do it. Well, I didn't at that point know a lot about knowledge management. I knew a little bit, but not a great deal. But I thought, okay, an opportunity has come my way. Let's go for it and see where it leads. So I'm a librarian. I looked up about knowledge management. I read around it. I joined some communities of practice, and I started to work on a knowledge management strategy and delivery policy for the Ministry of Defence. And I did that I ended up doing that for 10 years. What the unit I'd moved into transitioned into the MOD's knowledge and information management team, and I was the knowledge management lead within that team. And as part of that, I also volunteered for some more cross-government working groups to develop a set of knowledge principles for government and to develop a knowledge management maturity model for government. And again, this is how you build your skill set, you build your networks, and you get on. Again, after 10 years, the job as the Library of Information Service at the Scottish Government came up, and I thought, yeah, I'm ready for another change. Moved back into libraries, so I applied for that job and I got it, and that's where I am now, managing their Library and Information Service. In terms of what I've just told you, the big takeaway from that for all of you is that as information professionals, you have a lot of transferable skills, and the government procurement profession, knowledge management information profession, is made up of these 6 separate sub-professions, if you like, or skills areas. And my librarian skills, where we're about organizing knowledge, we're about managing knowledge, we're about retrieving it, finding it, etc., are very transferable into most of these areas. And I had a bit of systems management experience at one point as well, which, if you've got that kind of experience, you can also, information architecture is they're transferable into that. So if you're looking to build a career, don't just focus in on one area. Remember that all these different areas, not just in government, but outside as well. Information management is a big, big area. We're seeing all these public inquiries at the moment, many of which are homing in information management. Knowledge management, connecting people, getting the knowledge out of people, transferring knowledge from person to person as people move on. That's really important. Information rights, data protection, freedom of information, etc. These are all big areas. And librarianship is still, and records management, they're all, the traditional stuff is all still in demand as well. So remember, you've got transferable skills, and don't focus your job search in just one narrow area. What do we look for in a government librarian? If I was looking for an assistant librarian, this top set would be what I was looking for at the moment in my particular role. Inquiries management skills, so reference skills, literature searching. We do an awful lot of that. We feed into policy and evidence building. And most government libraries do have a fairly sizable literature search service. Information training, we do a lot of training around information literacy, around fake news, around research skills, around internet search skills for staff. And we do the traditional stuff as well. There's still cataloguing, classification, interlibrary loans, etc. to be done. As you move up, I would expect for the next level, the B2, B3 as we call it, librarian, you would want to add in things like designing training, scheduling training, data management skills. That's really important now, because you have to have the management, get the management information out to people. You also have to be aware of the data protection side. Staff and service supervision and management, and financial awareness. And at my level, you add in financial management, staff and service management, and planning, staffing planning, contract management, comms, communications, and management information. I have to justify my service to the existence of my service to my senior leaders. So just go back a bit. The personal qualities we're looking for, if I was doing a job advert, we'd be looking for these qualities. You have to be adaptable. There's a lot of things coming at you. Enthusiastic. You have to have initiative. You have to be able to focus and prioritize, because we are dealing with things like First Minister's questions. You know, we can get a query saying we need something immediately to go. Can you help us out with a brief? You've got to be able to prioritize. You've got to be able to work to deadlines. If it's First Minister questions, for example, you have to meet that deadline. And emotional intelligence is a real thing that you, if you're going to be dealing with staff, you need to have that ability to relate. What we look for in candidates is in the job advert, it will say we'd like you to have an appropriate professional qualification or a confirmed intention to work towards one. That might be a qualification from a information and library school, or it might be a CILIP qualification, but we want you to have to demonstrate that you've got some kind of qualification or intention to work towards. We look for familiarity with the latest trends, not just in librarianship, but in knowledge and information management in general. So at the moment, AI is a very big thing. Information literacy is a very big thing. And we look for evidence of ability against specific competences. These are the current Scottish Government competences: self-awareness, people management, communications, improving performance, etc. Self-awareness is the one that everyone says, what's that about? That's about things like how you cope with change, or how you cope with feedback. You know, we might say, tell us about a time when you had to deal with criticism, for example, and how you cope. We're trying to get a sense of that kind of personal awareness. And I didn't hear Kristen's talk, but I heard enough of it to suggest that she's covered quite a lot of these tips, but I'll pick out some that specifically if you're in government. So if you're doing a competence-based application, star your competence. That's what's the situation, what was the task, what was the action, what was the result, and read the requirement thoroughly, because most competences are done well if they're starred, but some don't lend themselves to starring. You might be better listing a couple of things. Always have 2 or 3 examples for each competence, and don't repeat the competences in your application form in your interview. The interviewers have already read the application form. They want to hear something different in your interview, so always have 2 or 3 examples. And if you haven't got much experience, if you're a new professional, you can take examples from your private life, from maybe volunteering that you've done, or Duke of Edinburgh or something like that. Anything that illustrates the competence in a good way. It doesn't have at your stage. We know that you might not always have the professional experience. Build networks, you know, come to things like this, join committees, volunteer, get to know people. Always try to move out with your comfort zone. Take those new opportunities as they're presented to yourselves. If you get an interview with us, be prepared for a complementary exercise like a role play, an intro exercise, or a presentation. I would tend to go for presentations myself. I think role plays and intros are a bit tricky for different personality types. But if it is a presentation, always stick to the brief and the allotted time. When you're in an interview, always use I. We want to know what you did, not the team you worked in. And there's a tendency for people to say we did, or you would do this. No, what I did this, I did it this way. How. You'll always be asked open questions, or you should always be asked open questions. So tell us about a time. Can you give us an example? And remember, the panel is never out to trap you. We genuinely want you to answer those questions to the best of your ability. And if you're looking for jobs and you have an interest in government information jobs, civil service jobs, the link there, I presume, Kristen, you'll be sending these presentations out?
We will, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Register for civil service jobs, because any job that goes to external will be on civil service jobs, and of course register for all the other job sites as well. And that is it from me. I hope I've stuck to time. Anyone got any questions?
Fantastic, Margaret. Thank you so much. There's such a lot there. I think that point about transferable skills that can transfer to everybody here, whatever their focus is, whatever their sector is. And I was really struck by that point about emotional intelligence too. That's really to actually see that articulated, because I think it's something that a lot of employers are looking for, but perhaps can't quite capture. But it's so critical, and now more than ever. And I can see this being very much echoed in the chat. Fiona saying such a helpful practical advice about saying I, not we. And I know that you'll also be giving that to your mentees as part of chartership and certification.
Yeah, the reflective statements, they always start out with you, and I always have to tell them it's I.
So just, yes, yet again, your chartership is great preparation for what you're going to be doing, searching for roles. And Ania's also noted that putting yourself out there, I think I was really struck by the challenges that you're continually giving yourself throughout your career, that you reach a certain point, you think, yeah, I'm ready for something new, bring it on. That was so admirable. I love it. We've also got a fantastic question about, they've already described the really diverse range of areas, yeah, that you've gained knowledge and experience in. Are there any particular areas that you feel like you wish you'd been able to concentrate more on before moving on to something else?
I think the answer to that is yes, I do miss knowledge management. It's not a big thing at the moment in the Scottish Government. They're very, very focused on information management. Rightly so. You have to get your information management right in government. You really have to be able to retrieve the records. We've all seen the public inquiries that are going on at the moment. You need to be able to produce the receipts. But I do miss the knowledge management side, because that was a very, very big part of my life. and I've kept my hand in by staying on the committee, the BSI committee, but I don't participate in the working groups as much as I used to, and I do miss that.
That's great. And I think even your approach to that, the fact that you would, be part of the committee, that there's more than one way in which to develop skills to express your passion for a particular area of work. So that's so helpful. Thank you. I don't know that we have any other questions at the moment, but please do keep them going. Just a lot of appreciation for that, Margaret. So thank you so much. And of course, we've seen how much your own fellowship has enriched your career and also being a mentor. And I know we're going to now turn to another member of the West Branch Committee who is very soon to become chartered, who is in that process herself. So Kimberly, whenever you're ready, can I hand the virtual floor over to you, please?
Sure thing. Thanks, Kirsten. Is my screen sharing now?
It is perfect. Thanks, Kim.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, there we go. So hello, everybody. My name is Kimberly Bryce. I'm currently the Resource Librarian for Acquisitions and Collections at Glasgow Caledonian University. I've just popped a little quote from my job profile, which sort of sums up what I do, and that is to ensure the efficient and effective acquisition, description and management of our electronic and physical resources, which is a very high level way of saying I manage our subscribed resources primarily from point of purchase through description, cataloguing, making them available online, and then making those resources available to our users. I also wear many hats, as a lot of us at GCU do, so I'm involved in a lot of wider projects and working groups across the library, but also across the university and the wider sector as well. So one of these examples, which is one of something that's very close to my heart, is our Relax and Renew area, which is a wellbeing area for our staff and students within the library. So I do a lot of work on that, organising events, organising the space, and working with the team to grow the collection there. Some other things that I also do is I work with Schedule, which is the Scottish Higher Education Digital Library. This is a group of representatives from all academic libraries throughout Scotland who work to get procurement. I'm not describing this in the best way, Fiona, you might be able to do it better, but we work together to ensure that all university and college libraries are getting the best resources for a reasonable amount of money. So I'm currently the chair of our learning content group. I also work with SCIRL, which is the Scottish Confederation of University and Research Libraries, and their Equality and Diversity Inclusion Network. And again, I work with CILIPS West Branch as a committee member and also as a career mentor for the CILIP scheme that Kirsten was describing earlier. So to give you a bit of background, I think I'm incredibly lucky that I actually started my journey in libraries while I was still in high school. My first ever job was actually working in my local library, which I absolutely loved as a weekend library assistant, and I used to work full time throughout the summers as well, and I absolutely loved it. I do really think that if everyone's lucky enough to get a chance to work in public libraries, it really sets you in good stead for a career in libraries. You'll experience absolutely every possible outcome, I think, in a public library. It's a really good learning tool, and it really helped me develop as a person. I really loved working there. I worked there for a couple of years until I went to university, and then to try and diversify the area that I worked in, I moved to work at Strathclyde University as a weekend library assistant there until I'd finished my degree. My first kind of professional post was working as a school librarian. I have to say, at the time, I was very much in the mindset, which I'm sure will be familiar to others, in that I need a job. I need any job that I can get. I was very open to what sector that would be in. I had an idea roughly of what I enjoyed doing. I absolutely loved working in public libraries. And that was really where I wanted to go back to, but I found myself working as a school librarian, possibly one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. I have a huge respect to the colleagues who work in the school sector. It's a very rewarding but very difficult job. It was also my first experience of managing other staff members, which was a big step up for me. It was a lot to take on in my first professional role, but I was so lucky that the council I was working with had an excellent school library support system in place. They were really, really great to work with. When I moved back to Glasgow, I worked briefly in a college library as a learning advisor, and that was again a really difficult, different role for me. It involved a lot of teaching, which I had never done before, working with a completely different group of stakeholders, which was really interesting, really challenging, but again, really rewarding. In the 2013, so just over 10 years ago now, I moved to GCU initially as a senior library assistant in my team. Again, I had experience of working in an academic library, and I was really confident that I knew what I was coming into, but moving from a front of house role to a back of house role was such a massive change. It required a completely different skill set. You were working with the same stakeholders, but in a completely different way. So it really opened my eyes to what an academic library does, and I really fell in love with it. I didn't think, I thought I knew what an academic library done, and I thought I knew what support it gave their stakeholders, but I really didn't. I was lucky enough to be seconded into a post of when our serials librarian retired, and I worked in that for 2 years until our team restructured, and I gained the full-time role that I'm in now. So yeah, very varied. I think I'm very lucky that I've worked across a lot of different areas within libraries, in a lot of different roles. They've all came with their own challenges, but I feel like it's helped me to become more rounded as a professional. I think my first piece of advice, if I can give any, is that not to go in with the mentality that you think you know what a service delivers or what a certain sector does. I definitely learned so much in all of these areas, things I didn't expect to, and I enjoyed things a lot more than I thought I would going in. So yeah, just to really keep that open mind, it's definitely worth it, I think, in my opinion, trying things that you wouldn't necessarily think you're suited for. Like Margaret was saying, putting yourself out of that comfort zone, that's when you're in the learning zone, isn't it? So that's when you learn new skills, you learn new things about yourself and ways to work. So in terms of what we would look for if someone was joining our team, I had a little look at my role profile, and some of the things it would ask a candidate applying for a resource librarian position are things such as having experience of metadata and cataloguing and experience of using an LMS. And I just wanted to highlight, obviously, those things that will come as standard for that type of role, but if you're maybe coming at this as a new professional, as someone who's moving into the library sector, don't be put off by these sort of prerequisites on a role profile. Coming into the role that I'm in now, I'm not a master at cataloguing. I wouldn't consider myself like a premier professional in those areas, but I know enough to do my job, and that's what's important. If you've gone through any sort of LIS degree, you already have a really good basis and understanding of metadata and cataloguing, and you're going to use that to build in your role. So don't be put off by things you're like, oh, I've actually not done that much of this practically. Most of the learning I have in these areas are on the job, as well as things like using an LMS. If you're, again, very new to libraries, you maybe not have specific experience, but if you've got experience of using any sort of software professionally, even like point of sale systems, if you've worked in retail, booking systems, if you've worked in hospitality, these are all management systems. And if you can show that you've got the transferable skills between your own experience and what the role profile is asking for, that is as valid, I would say. Things such as knowledge of trends and issues in licensing and open access and scholarly comms. Again, these are all things that are moving at a really fast pace. And if you're maybe coming to the sector quite fresh, quite new, I would really recommend looking up some sources on this, having a little background reading. You're not going to be expected to know the ins and outs of this 100%. I still find it very difficult to keep on top of all the information that gets sent out around these topics. So being on mailing lists such as the UKSG e-news and things like that, just to keep you up to date with what's happening in those worlds, will set you in good stead for an interview. Also, a large portion of my role is around project work. So we quite often ask questions around project management experience. And again, don't feel as if you have to be constrained to things you've done professionally. If you've got personal experience of planning, you still have those skills, you have the experience to talk about. If it's something you've maybe done voluntarily, personally, a project that's not around libraries, something that you've done at university, it's all relevant. In terms of the personal qualities, like Margaret said as well, flexibility and adaptability is really important in this role. Like I said, you're working on a lot of projects interspersed between your day-to-day work, so the ability to kind of keep on top of all your tasks, especially if you're leading projects, is really important, and that ability to work independently, manage your own time, be really organised, is so important. Finally, just to finish off, things that we look for in our candidates at GCU, our mission statement is that we're the university for the common good, and that really underpins everything that we do. And it does maybe sounds a bit corporate, but everybody does really believe that, and I think it is very well aligned with the mentality and morality of people that work in libraries anyway. I think that is what we're all trying to work towards. And if you can demonstrate that mission statement in any way with your own experience, that we'd be really interested to hear that. Also, our core values of creativity, responsibility, integrity and confidence, if you can highlight through any of your experiences how you would align your experience to these core values, we love to hear that as well. A large part of our job, as well as and what we look for in new applicants, is a commitment to continuing professional development. So things like this, for example, it's showing that you are looking to develop your skill set, you're looking to grow your networks and things like that. Like I said, things that we're dealing with in our team are changing very fast. The way the team looks now to when I joined in 2013 is so different. The services and the support that we provide for our stakeholders is so different, and it's always changing. So it's really important that the staff we have that mentality that they're always keeping on top of these changes, and growing those skills that are going to be needed to support the services that we deliver. And then finally, I just wanted to put in that we look a lot for team fit. So this is really just to say to not be scared to let your personality come through in an interview. I think it's really important. It's something that we do actually put down on a requirement. We want to see people who are going to bring part of themselves to their job, the things that they're interested in, their passions, and how can we integrate that through the work that we're doing? How can we pull things and things that they're passionate about, and obviously team working as well is very important. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that that's something that we look at quite a lot. That was everything I had. I think that was quite fast, but I hope that made sense and was useful.
Absolutely, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I'm here playing sector bingo, and I think, what is that? Did I count 4? Have we got public schools, FE, HE? That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Hopefully that's it. I don't know if we'll be moving into any other ones, but I'll never say never.
Definitely. Well, I love how you're contributing to the common good wherever you are, but especially.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've popped a link to Relax and Renew into the chat. Well worth a visit, everybody. And you can see the blog post. I think that was when the space launched. But such a great example of just how libraries can contribute to health, to well-being, to information literacy, to health literacy itself. So a really, really stunning piece of work from you and the whole team. And I love those tips about actually for new professionals, and that you can, if you feel like you're lacking experience in a certain area professionally, you can draw on your personal life, draw on your personality as well to really enrich that application. Amazing. So I know that I don't see any questions at the moment. Please do keep popping them in the chat. We can come to them at the end of it. Yeah, just lots of appreciation, lots of thanks. So people have learned loads, Kimberly, so thank you. And I know, Fiona, we have quite a complimentary presentation coming up next. So whenever you're ready, yeah, I'll hand over to you. The virtual floor is yours.
Okay, just sort out my screen sharing. Let's see. Right, is that sharing okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Fiona.
Great, okay. Yeah, so there is a reasonable amount of overlap between Kimberly's job and my job. I think what I'm going to try and demonstrate is they're maybe not exactly the same. We've had slightly different career paths. Mine's been all in academic libraries, unlike Kimberly's. Yeah, so I'll just get cracking. There we go. Okay, so my name's Fiona Tinto, and I'm the Electronic Resources or eResources Librarian at University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. The summary description of my role is that I have responsibility for maintaining access to our library e-resource collection. So that's our electronic books, electronic journals, and electronic databases. More specifically, the main things that this involves are investigating and trialling potential new e-resources, setting up access to newly purchased e-resources, managing changes to the existing e-resources. So for example, things like maintaining the authentication configuration or all the work that's involved if publishers move their product to a different website. Removing access to cancelled e-resources, troubleshooting any access problems, and working with usage statistics. So those are the things that I think of as the bread and butter of my role. There's obviously other things that I do. I'm involved in a lot of projects as well, just whatever comes up really. As well as my day job, I am currently the vice chair of the Schedule Learning Content Group. As Kimberly said, she's the current chair. As Kimberly said, SHEDO stands for Scottish Higher Education Digital Library. Kimberly's already explained what that is, but basically it's the purchasing consortium for Scottish higher education libraries. So we negotiate deals to electronic content, really. There's different subgroups. There's a journals group, a book group, and we're in the learning content group, which is other things really that don't fit neatly into a journal or a book package category. I've also been a CILIP and CILIP Scotland member since 2012 and a committee member of CILIPS West Branch since I think about 2015 or thereabouts. What I'd say about committee membership, that type of thing, is that it can add to your workload, obviously, but you gain so much experience from being involved in things like that. They're an excellent way of meeting other people from outside your own organisation, people in different sectors. And the other thing I would say is that professional groups like that really are an integral part of our sector, and they are made up of volunteers. So they only function if people get involved and take a turn. So from a, I don't know, philanthropic or side of things, it is really important to get involved. And I've put one final bullet at the end there, just describing some of the other things that I've been involved in during 2023. So I presented at UKSG's Introduction to Resource Discovery webinar event, and I was also a member of the advisory board for one of our eResource products, which was undergoing development. That was a consultancy type post involving testing and feedback over several months, and it was something I got paid for. So for that type of work, it is something you should check with your employer if you're allowed to take part in that type of thing, but those were both great opportunities. I didn't apply directly to take part in either of those. I was invited to take part in both of them, and I believe that that occurred because in each of those cases, the organisers were people that I have developed strong working relationships with through my day job. So I think it's just a really good example of how you can network and nurture good relationships, and that really can reap benefits in ways that you might not expect. So my job history and qualifications, my undergraduate degree was English literature with a minor in theatre studies, quite common, I think, in the library world. After uni, I worked for a few years in a call centre for a healthcare company, handling appointment bookings, price and information inquiries, that type of thing. We were the central inquiry centre for about 200 hospitals around the UK, and it was in that job that I developed an interest in information and knowledge management and sharing. So off the back of that, in 2012, I went back to uni and gained my master's degree in information and library studies. I had several work placements and volunteering roles in libraries before I got my first library post, which was library assistant at University of Stirling. I was based in the library acquisitions department, but I also did some work in cataloguing and on the inquiry desk. I miss that. I miss the inquiry desk. My current role is very back of house, and I think if there's one thing I miss, it is being more involved in the directly customer facing things. While at Stirling, I was really fortunate to gain a secondment opportunity which lasted slightly over a year. That was covering for the serials librarian who was herself seconded to a different post. And the job title during that secondment was eResources librarian. Once that secondment period ended, I returned to my library assistant position for several months. At that point, I was looking for another job for a promotion. And then fortunately a vacancy appeared for eResources librarian at University of Strathclyde. I was appointed to that post at the end of November 2016, and I've now been working in this role for over 7 years. So although my current role has the same job title as my secondment at Stirling, they are actually quite different posts. The post at Stirling was primarily focused on serials and subscription management. The main components of that role involved the sort of core acquisitions work of managing the renewals, processing orders, invoices, that type of thing. Whereas in my current post, although I am based within the acquisitions department, I don't deal directly with managing any of the orders or invoice processing. And my current role is more focused on access, authentication, and discovery of our electronic content. So I think those would be the three keywords that I would pick out of my current role as relevant. So in terms of job applications and descriptions, I would say remember that the same job titles can be used for very different posts and vice versa. The same post can have a whole range of different titles in different institutions. So I would say always look at the job description. Don't dismiss things just based on the job title alone, because until you read through a job description, you really don't know what's involved. Don't make assumptions about what will be involved in a post just from the job title, I would say. I was really fortunate in that the job I have at Strathclyde was a newly created post when I started. So in many ways, I've been able to shape the role rather than working with inherited processes and workflows, which I always thought was a really nice position to be in. So personal qualities. The eResources content that I'm working with is owned and provided by third parties. So that's publishers and content providers. And that means that very frequently the library is not in control of how these resources are delivered and made available to us. And because of that, you have to accept in this role that very often you'll be working to other people's time frames, and ultimately you just have to be flexible in that respect. Related to that, the nature of my job is that a lot of things drag on for a very long time before they're fully completed. For example, technical problems might need referred to a number of third parties for correction, or publishers can implement changes and developments in staggered phases over really long periods of time. And I found that that requires a different type of organisational skill compared to workloads that consist primarily of short-term tasks or projects. And my role also involves a lot of liaison with colleagues and suppliers, and also to a lesser degree directly with customers. So strong communication skills and a collaborative working attitude are absolutely essential to this post. In terms of what we look for in candidates for this position, although it's not a systems librarian post, my job is more technical than most other posts in our library. So although I don't have an IT or a developer background, and that's not something we'd look for, we would look for evidence that candidates have a strong standard of computer literacy and technical competency for my role or for anyone working in my team. Library and Information Resources at Strathclyde is a customer service excellence, CSE for short, CSE accredited service, and CSE is a huge focus for us. So although my role is more back of house rather than directly customer facing, we're still looking for candidates to demonstrate a really strong customer service ethos. And finally, for my particular role, although I'm not directly involved in the ordering and invoicing, it is really important for me to have a solid understanding and experience of eResource acquisitions models and licensing, because these things underpin the way that we set up, deliver, and maintain our eResources. We wouldn't necessarily ask for that for people coming into my team. That's something you can learn on the job. But I think if somebody was coming into my role, that's something we would really look for. And to just bring this full circle to the start of my presentation, one of the things that I'm gaining great experience from is being involved in schedule in the consortia purchasing. That's just gaining me experience at a totally different level compared to anything that I've had from my prior work experience. So that is me. I've now got the cat at my feet. I would say that's another skill that is very important since lockdown, is learning to work with a cat, interrupting your every call.
Herding cats. I think a lot of us have been there in our careers one way or the other, Fiona. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. I think you brought out so richly how schedule, how general committee membership, how that can enrich your experience. And I've actually noted down that phrase about to network and nurture. That's really the spirit that you want to bring to interactions with colleagues and interactions with library users as well. Really fantastic. Thank you. I can see that we've got a couple of questions, and I am conscious of time, so we can continue these conversations in the chat. But Valerie's picked up on Ania's kind of, I think it's such a valuable tip to not judge a job by its title, or judge the job by its cover, as Ania's put, which of course we're very much not about. Don't judge a book by its cover here. So Valerie's wondering, what are your thoughts on candidates changing the title of our previous job from what an organisation called it to something that actually better matches their current application? And Kimberly, I can see that you've advised maybe keeping the title as it is, but still using your CV application to highlight what the key tasks and responsibilities were.
I would agree, and I think that from somebody that's been involved now in interview panels slightly, I would hope that everybody on the other side of the table has enough information about the sector to not look at a job description and make assumptions about that. So we all know that job titles vary hugely from post to post, from organisation to organisation, and that organisations are all structured very differently. So I think, as we've talked about, me and Kimberly have kind of similar roles, but just because of the way our organisations are structured, the specific remit of our posts is quite different, really. So I think it's not what's on your CV. The job titles that are in your CV are not the important thing. It's the picking out the skills and the relevancy to the job you're applying for and the experience you have. So I would just put what your job title was at the time, but really that's not the important thing. It's really highlighting how your experience and your skills are relevant to the post you're going for.
That's so valuable, Fiona. Fantastic advice. Thank you. And you'll see that Aria's also asked a really interesting question about whether it's an advantage or disadvantage to not quite know exactly where you're going in your career when you're a new professional. And I think the consensus thus far is absolutely not, that trying lots of different things is brilliant. And then Kimberly's pointed out that customer-facing role, great, because it gives you an overview of library services. So we'd love your thoughts on that as well, either now or in the chat. Fantastic. Yeah, we can. Well, I think actually, because I'm conscious of time, because we've got 2 more terrific lightning talks to get in, but yeah, if you could add your thoughts to the chat, Fiona, that'd be so helpful. Thank you. And thanks for such a terrific presentation. Now, Ania, I know you're up next. You've already had a couple of shout outs this evening. So whenever you're ready, over to you.
Yes, you should be able to see my screen. I'm going to change it to the presenter mode, and you should be able to hear me, of course.
We can indeed, Ania. Thank you.
Yes. So this is me. I got a little bit darker since that picture was taken. You can follow me if you want on X. I'm still there, and I still use X for professional engagement, and I learn a lot actually from different people I liaise with on X, and I still believe there is a chance and a hope for that online tool. So my current title is Library Services Manager Digital Skills, and I work for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. However, it's quite interesting what Fiona said about the titles, because you look at this title and you think, okay, Library Services Manager. So yeah, we've got the Knowledge Network and NHS GGC. There is a Knowledge Services Manager. And then we've got sites libraries, we've got specialists librarians. And you might think, oh, so this is where my role sits. But yes, I'm part of the senior team for the Knowledge Network, but my role is about something different. So my role is linked directly to the eHealth digital on-demand strategy. The strategy was published in 2023, and basically it was discovered at the time there is a person needed who will be able to deliver a program of work to support the workforce digital literacy and skills enhancement. And this is exactly what I'm here to do at GGC. So in my program of work, I look after things like Champions Network. We are looking into introducing digital skills framework. We are looking into doing digital skills assessment across our workforce. We are looking into digital inclusion components, because of course in our workforce we do still have people who don't use technology, for example, in the day-to-day life, and then there is that question how we could bring them in, and also how upskilling them within the workplace can then have a ripple effect elsewhere. And the best way to explain the kind of the core of this program is that it's all about not just giving people technology and tools and solutions. It's about learning people how to use them, how to make informed choices and decisions. And that role really resonates with my career pathway. And I'm just going to move to the next slide so you will see why. So, here we are. So I've highlighted here my 3 very recent jobs, different roles, but I'm by heart probably academic librarian and liaison librarian, and information literacy, media literacy, digital skills, digital literacy, you name it. It's really close to my heart. And I was really privileged to work for universities, different universities for many years, especially here in the UK. My career pathway, so there's 2 Anias. There is Ania before coming to the UK 14 years ago, and there is Ania after. So back in Poland, I was a professional librarian. I was in professional post. I was in a senior role at a very big regional museum in Upper Silesia. And I was also at the time doing my PhD, and I was really happy. And then I fell in love and the world changed and I moved to a different country. And of course, you know, it's very different. So I had to reinvent myself and I've kind of started from scratch. So of course I didn't get a professional post to start with. So I've took different opportunities on board, and I've worked, and because I'm also a qualified teacher, you will see this from the next slide. I actually started working for MenCap and I was support worker for people with learning disabilities. And that opened another really fascinating things for me. I did a diploma in health and social care. And then my qualifications in education, in health and social care, and in librarianship and information science actually opened a really good opportunity for me at Rampton Hospital. I was a hospital librarian there, employed for a very short period of time just to transition the service, the move service from the council back to the trust. But having these 3 sets of expertise kind of gave me that opportunity, and that was my way into the library's work and information professionals, hats, wardrobe in the UK. And then straight after that, after 6 months, I've started working for a university in England, at Bishop Grosseteste University in Lincoln, a fabulous place. And I was there as systems librarian. However, again, job title, but not my remit. So my remit actually was research support and education as well. So I was responsible for kind of information literacy portfolio on behalf of the library, and then research support came after that. But also systems, that was my kind of a core role. And then with my husband now, but at the time my partner, we had this fantastic vision about, oh, let's move to Scotland, let's see what's, we fell in love with Scotland. And so again, I was very lucky. I got a job here. I was as an academic liaison librarian, and then things didn't go as planned, and I've moved sectors. So more than 3 years ago, I moved to the health sector, and initially it was a post in Lanarkshire. And again, my title was Systems Librarian, but I had nothing to do with systems that you encounter in libraries. My role was more linked with clinical guidelines governance, and I led on the clinical guidelines mega app development. That was my baby. And from Lanarkshire, I moved now to GGC. I've been in my post 3 months, and I'm kind of back with what I really love: the skills, the literacy, and teaching and learning. And I hope that I will be able to really develop that role. And if you ask me questions next year, I will give you more rounded answer what my role actually is about, because I'm still making things. I've got this really, really interesting opportunity to create it, to work it out, and see what happens next. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So my qualifications, so I've mentioned a couple of things. So librarianship was the first one. I did also journalism, I did scientific information, I did persuasion, communication, and then I'm also a fellow of Advanced HE. And my very, very recent add-on is the NEST Digital Lead Alumni. So I participated in the Digital Leadership Program at NHS Scotland. It's a program funded by the Scottish Government. And I believe that particular program actually quite helped me to get where I am at the moment. That was that extra cherry on top of the cake that maybe convince the panel, yes, that I'm the right person. And also I've listed all of that just to show you that you will never be done growing. And I'm not never done growing. And what basically, you might have your qualifications, you might be qualified, you might have some postgraduate studies already, or you are about to finish postgraduate studies. But then when you enter the world of work, your PDP or CPD, you have to really keep it alive and in line with what you do. It's like in my current role, because it is a program of work, so you can potentially call me program manager. I've never done program management qualifications per se. I did project management, like Prince 2 and similar workshops, but I've never done any type of certification. So again, I'm looking into that. Maybe this is another thing that I should be looking into, to then be able to really develop in my role and to really give back what's required. So hopefully, that's the case for many professionals. And I think we are really, really, really privileged that yes, we work with information, we work with knowledge, and we work within this ever-changing environment, which is fantastic. And for this session, I've picked two possible roles at NHS GGC when it comes to librarians. So one of the role is assistant librarian. This is a grade 5 post. Quite often, this role is fulfilled by people who are newly graduate and quite fresh to the sector. And it's kind of that entering, so you are a professional, so it's not a senior role, and it might get you somewhere else going forward. So after that, you can become a specialist librarian, for example, or you can be one of the librarians managing a sector libraries, or you can come and have my role or any other senior role. But I think this is kind of and I would say this is a professional entry level kind of position in health sector. In terms of personal qualities, because it is very much hands-on on the ground, listening to others, and kind of being able, you have to be able to step up and so on. So for me, the 3 are for this role: problem solving, flexibility, and teamwork. And again, what we look for in candidates, I think in this instance, like I've said, because for me it is more like an entry level role, I would look for that willingness to learn and grow within the role. And then the second role I have for you is the specialist librarians. So I don't know if any of you have heard about evidence-based practice, but in health sector, health and social care sectors, specialist librarians, they support that aspect. They are there to support literature searches. They are there to participate in systematic literature reviews. They support clinical decisions. They give that gift of time to clinicians, so they don't have to do that research themselves. So they are those really, really crucial partners when it comes to healing people and caring for people. And I think it's very, very beautiful. Those roles are very beautiful roles because, they have this kind of, for me personally, from where I sit and I look at it, there is that added kind of value and maybe kind of instant reward. Like sometimes you get into with teaching that you've done something, you run an excellent session, the feedback is superb, and then so you get that gratification. Key personal qualities: initiative, confidence, and creativity. So of course, it's about selling yourself to the wider community, letting people know that yes, you are there, and exactly this, you be explicit on what you can deliver, and what is your expertise. So you have to have a little bit of confidence in you, and you have to be creative, because it's finding different ways of promoting this type of role, and also a little bit of creativity is needed here when it comes to gathering evidence, evaluating the role, and telling impact stories or collating impact stories. And what I would personally look for in candidates in this instance would be willingness to seek and share expertise and grow expertise of others. And finally, my last slide, just a drop of wisdom. So when it comes to applying for a role, going to an interview, always start from the good place. Always think about your skills, your competences, and don't be afraid. Put yourself out there. Apply even for the role. When you assess the job description, you might think, oh, I don't have this one, I don't have this one. But if there is something that really fascinates you, try to analyze it and try to find within yourself set of skills and knowledge and expertise, how you map. It's not about having it all. It's not about having it all. It's also about kind of the willingness to learn. And the because is quite clear. And for me, in my day-to-day role, in my professional life, yes, I don't want to wake up in another 20 years and regret my decisions. And certainly what I can tell now, that I don't regret my decisions. And funny enough, actually I discovered that it is exactly this year, 20 years since I entered the profession. So I can stop sharing now. Thank you.
Well, 20 years and counting. Ania, thank you so much. That was so encouraging, so empowering, and really, really appreciate it. I know for reasons of time, I'm going to actually, if anybody's got any questions, I've popped our email address in the chat. I think we'll maybe deal with them in the chat and deal with them by email, because we have one more fantastic lightning talk this evening. And you definitely don't want to miss that. So Kavan, I'll maybe hand over to you if you can start sharing your screen. But Ania, thank you. There's so much. Never done growing indeed. Information professionals can wear many hats. There's so many hashtags there. It's impossible to pick just one, and we don't want to. So thank you. That was really, really inspiring.
All right, can everyone see that?
We
Hold
can.
on, let me see
Great.
if I can get these faces away.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, great. So my name's Kavan. I'm Kavan Stafford. I work for Glasgow Life for the public library system. There I am there. That's me, the Thessaloniki Central Library in Greece. That's where my wife is from. So I am at the moment an information officer at the Metro Library. It's quite a strange and unique job in a lot of ways, and I've put my kind of job description there as neatly as I can put it. So I work across two different departments. So for about 25% of the time, about a quarter of the week, give or take, I work for the business department in the library. So we have a business and intellectual property centre in the library, and we help people with small businesses make use of library resources to get started with that. So that's kind of our kind of raison d'etre. And as part of that role, I'll do one-to-ones with people about that. I also run workshops, introducing people to the resources, and then also we have a specialism in intellectual property. So I run workshops on copyright and trademarks and things like that. About half the time, most of the time really, I spend working for the leisure, what we call our leisure and lifestyle department. That's our lending department in the Metro. We actually lend across the whole building, but that's our kind of fiction department. So with that, I do what you would probably expect someone to do if they were managing a smaller branch library. So we kind of treat the bottom floor of the Metro like a branch library. So I manage all the stock and displays in there. I do a lot of outreach work, so a lot of workshops for the public, for adults and children. I do tours, I do school visits, I do craft clubs, I do, coder dojos, all these types of things. And I've put there responsible for visitor numbers and book issues. What I mean by that is that these are the things that I get in trouble for not having good enough. These are the things that people come to me to complain about. And then also I do a lot of staff management. Working in the Metro and in a professional role probably has maybe a bit more staff management than a lot of similar roles will. So for example, if you're a librarian in the branch libraries for Glasgow anyway, you don't have staff to manage at the moment. Whereas we have quite a lot of staff to manage in the Metro. We have 33 library assistants in the Metro. We can split those between 5 of us. So that involves just managing holidays, sickness, disciplinary issues, all that sort of thing. Sorry, 7 of us. Yeah, I forgot to count a couple of people. It's because two of them are part-time. I love them, but they're not here all the time. So my career so far, I studied English at university and then did a master's directly after that. It was also in English and medieval English language. Now I had a friend in that master's. Her name's Charlotte. She's actually one of the librarians at the Glasgow School of Art now. And when she was going for when we were finishing that master's, she was just about to go to Strathclyde and do her master's in librarianship. And I remember distinctly having a conversation with her about whether I would do something like that. And I said I'd find it boring. I thought it would be really boring, so I said I wasn't going to do that. I then spent some time doing what I'd done through my degrees, which was working as in a bookmakers, working at Ladbrokes. I managed the Ladbrokes for quite a few years, and I really hated that. That's a really horrible job. And as with one of the earlier people, I kind of reached a point in late 2016 when I was like, I need to get some sort of other job. And my wife, who worked in my then partner who worked in libraries at the time, helped me apply to be a library assistant. And I got my first library job working in Easterhouse Library. And I got there, I did my first shift. I finished at Ladbrokes on a Friday and started in the library on a Monday, and got my first shift, and then came home and said that I'd made a mistake. Because I found it really difficult. It was in fairness a bad day rather than a bad place. It was just I thought that would be every day. We had some kids come in and put shame and foam on the non-fiction books. So yeah. And I remember coming home and saying, I think I made a mistake. The only reason I didn't go back to Ladbrokes is because my boss at Ladbrokes had told me she thought I was making a mistake and that I would come back, and I obviously therefore couldn't do the walk of shame back. So I spent about 6 months at Easterhouse, and then an opportunity came up to do some hours in the Mitchell Library as a library assistant, and I went there in 2018 full time. And then in summer 2019, a job came up this information officer job came up, and I applied for that. I'd applied for it before actually and not gotten it, but I decided to apply for it again, and I got it this time. That was in July 2019. I decided to kind of couple that by going for my MSc in Library and Information Management, which I took from Ulster University. I did that remotely through the pandemic, as it turned out. And having done that, I'm now a CILIPS board member as well. I started being a board member last year, which I really love. So that's my career so far. That's the position I'm in now. So looking at applying to come into public libraries, which I would really, really recommend. I love working in public libraries. I love it so much. It's an absolutely brilliant job to have. It's a mental job to have, but it's really, really cool. So how to apply? All of our jobs are advertised in My Job Scotland. So that's where you're going to find any jobs for really any council's library services for public libraries. So we get people coming in a lot to ask us how to apply. That's how you apply. Look on My Job Scotland. They're all going to be there. Sign up. You can sign up for email shots to tell you if ones with certain keywords come up, like librarian, library, that sort of thing. For Glasgow, both the application and the interview are competency-based. The competencies are different for each job. I'll talk about them a little bit in the next slide, but they will be in the job pack. But if you can't find them, if you find that a bit difficult to navigate, just email the named manager. There'll be a manager named on the page for the application, and just email them. They'll send it to you, no problem at all. The interviews will be undertaken by 2 members of staff, so they'll do it together. Both of them will be writing down what you're saying. One of them might be writing slightly more than the others. When I've done it, I've usually made an agreement with the other person doing it with me that one of us will focus more on listening and the other one will focus a bit more on transcribing what's being said, so don't be put off. If you feel like one of them's not writing a lot, he or she's probably just listening. The interview questions, they need to be framed in what's called the SOAR format. So you'll get asked a question. It will take the format of tell us about a time when ... They'll be linked to the competencies. So say the competencies, for example, customer orientation. We would say something like, tell us about a time when you had to tell a customer something they didn't want to hear, but you still managed to provide good customer service. That's a pretty standard one. So we'd ask for, you give a situation, you say what happened, you then say what you did about it, what the outcome was, and a reflection, so what you would change. And what we're really looking for are people who are able to express their previous work experiences within the competencies, regardless of whether that experience is in library. So if some of your either early career or you're still uni just now, don't worry about that. I'm sure you're doing other jobs. You can use those as examples, and we take that at face value. I think, in fact, I kind of like to hear things from other jobs. I think a mistake that's often made I've put this at the bottom here, is not emphasising your own impact enough. And I'm saying this is a mistake that's made when I'm interviewing people. It's also a mistake that I've been told I've made in interviews in the past as well when I haven't got the job. You need to, I think we're kind of, I don't know if it's a Scottish thing or a British thing or whatever, but we're quite self-deprecating, and we tend to like to share not the blame, to share the kind of praise for things that we do. So we talk a lot about what we did as part of a team, and that's great. It's good to be part of a team, but you should also really focus on what your input was, so that when the interviewer goes away, they're walking away knowing exactly what it was that you did. Additionally, you don't want to spend too much time in the situation. People sometimes spend 10 minutes explaining the situation, then not that much time on the reflection and stuff. And the actions were much more interested in what you did and what the outcome of that was and what the actual situation was. So just do that in a sentence. So if you're applying for a library assistant, an information officer, a librarian job, we don't have assistant librarians at Glasgow Life. The information officers' jobs are in that role. So the key competencies for all of these will be customer orientation, self-development, communicating, decision-making, leadership, and forward thinking. These will be in various combinations. They have different levels, so level 1, 2, and 3. All of these jobs will be up to level 2 at the most. And the competencies also have kind of sub-competencies, which I know is frustrating. So we might have, for example, forward thinking might have a sub-competency, which is planning, for example. And in that case, we would tell you exactly what we were looking for that. In terms of what we're looking for from you, for professional roles, either a professional qualification from university, or we also take the ACLIP. I know a lot of academic libraries don't, but we do. We look for people to be really enthusiastic, able to learn on the job, because often the jobs are quite often quite distinct from what the people interviewing you are doing. They may not actually know everything you're doing day to day, so you kind of need to learn that in the job. And the ability to work as part of a really big and diverse team, not just within the libraries, but also with the community centres and the museums and all the other things that are all working together as part of the kind of community side of things. When we're looking for candidates, we look for a real awareness of what the role is like. What I mean by that is that we do sometimes get people coming in and saying, the reason I wanted to be a librarian is because I wanted I want a quiet job and I like to read. That's nice, but it's going to count against you in a public library interview anyway, because it's kind of the opposite of that. We want you to be excited about working with all the public, so children, adults, anyone else that comes in, and willing to have a very diverse role. So to give you an example of that, last Thursday, I came in at 12, that's when my shift started. I immediately went and led a class visit with some primary 3s. I was reading them a story. I went from that to give a presentation to some small business owners about how to apply for a trademark. And I went from that to a meeting about the council budgets. And I did all that within 4 hours. So it's a really diverse and strange job I have, and a lot of jobs in public libraries are like that. I just wanted to finish here with just some tips from some of the hiring managers at Glasgow Life. So I spoke to some of my colleagues that have been on panels with me or with each other, and they gave me their kind of top tips. So mine is, be upfront about your previous roles. I'd rather hear that you did the job with less responsibilities well than hear exaggerations about what you were doing. I know that there's an impulse to exaggerate. I have it too, but try not to, because simple examples are sometimes best. So if you were, working through uni, working in Waterstones or Tesco or whatever, on the counters, just talk about that. Don't give in to the impulse to try and imply you were kind of running the shop, that kind of thing. Just talk about that. Tell us what you were doing. Tell us that you were doing it well. That'll count for a lot. Karen says, spend more time thinking about your reflection when you're doing that SOAR model, and try to spend more time on that than on the situation. So people get caught up in the story of the situation too easily, and try writing down SOAR in front of you if you need it as a prompt. And she also says you can bring in notes, which you can. It will not count against you. People worry about that. If people bring in notes, I just think they're really prepared. It doesn't count against you. Alistair, who's one of my fellow information officers, he says you need to research the competencies and get used to the format. Lots of people don't realise that all the information is available to read before the interview, even when you're an external candidate, and they can make you much more comfortable knowing what to expect. don't be worried about taking in notes. He says again, it shows good preparation. Dawn, she's a principal librarian. She runs the Mitchell CSAs Match the Competencies. So make sure that when you're answering, you're listening to the question asked and actually hitting all those competency markers. Again, if you want to know what those are, they can be sent to you when you apply, and you can kind of go through it as a kind of tick box exercise, and I'd recommend doing that. And Tony says, apply for the job being advertised, not the job you wish was being advertised. This particularly applies for the library assistant and the information officer roles. Sometimes we get applications for those where people would like it to be a full librarian role and are applying as such, and it ends up counting against them because people who've focused on what the role they're actually applying for needs end up doing better, even though they may not have the same qualifications. So something to bear in mind. But I would recommend that you do apply for public libraries. Please do. You'll love it, honestly, I promise. And that's me.
Terrific, Kavan. Yeah, mental but cool. That definitely takes me back to my time in the public library front line. Oh, that was so, and thank you for sort of harnessing that hive mind at the Mitchell, everybody else's advice as well. So rich. And I think the point about bringing in notes that actually it shows preparation rather than works against you, that's really resonated with a lot of us. So thank you. Amazing. So I know that obviously, does anybody have any questions for either Ania or Kavan? We've been having some great conversations in the chat, sharing resources, sharing links for finding jobs. Also, a kind of oddest things ever returned in a library book, which has taken us to some gross/dark spaces, but we can handle getting a real sense for the diversity of the job. And apologies everybody for running slightly on. I think we were a bit ambitious, thinking that we could encompass everything that the West Branch Committee do. Just so much incredible work, so many incredible opportunities to showcase in an hour and a half. So thank you for sticking with us. Does anybody have any kind of last minute questions before we start to wrap up? Just a lot of appreciation for your presentation, Kavan, yours as well, Ania, and Chris, seconding how awesome public libraries are, very much so. No, not at all, Fiona. We need to, it's all about that skill of going off on a tangent. That is going to stand people in very good stead, I think, whatever role we go into.
Can I just thank all the presenters? It's been very much appreciated. They've been brilliant, really great. I've learned so much as well. And Kirsten, thank you so much for stepping in at the last minute as well. That's much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure. And so much thanks to you, Claire, as well, just conducting us all, keeping everything running in the background. So yeah, it's been a fascinating evening. I've learned so much, and I know that that's been the case for our attendees as well. If anybody does have any questions, if anything occurs to you, you've got the CILIPS email address there, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Just going to completely echo you there, Claire. Thank you so much to all our presenters, and thank you to you. Hopefully this has given you inspiration for whichever role you aspire to within this wonderful sector, and indeed an insight into the work that you can do as part of a branch committee, hint, hint. So we'll hopefully see you at a meeting before too long. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thanks, committee. Yeah, looking forward to the next West Branch event. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Bye.